let's move on to a Wall Street Journal interview where President Trump suggested that the United States could slap 10% tariffs on iPhones and laptops imported from China. Now, Ron, 10% tariff, that sounds like a lot. What would that mean for Apple and Apple's business?
Well, first off, I don't think it will actually happen. I think it's a negotiating tactic, a lot of bluster. This is not a political show, so I'm going to let everyone decide for themselves what they think about that bluster. But I do think it's a negotiating tactic. It's ahead of the G20 meeting where there'll be further discussions with China about the tariffs and about our trade war, for lack of a better term. So I don't think it is actually going to happen. But if it did, certainly a company the size of Apple could weather that storm, and they could do it by passing along price increases to consumers, although I have a feeling they would not do that. They probably would eat it. 10% might translate, I've read some research, to around $1 billion decrease in operating profit. It wouldn't be permanent. It would be, maybe over a few quarters until things got worked out. So $1 billion in total. If it was 25% tariff, then of course you're getting maybe triple that, $3 billion or so in lost operating profit. Again, Apple, a company the size of Apple, could easily weather that storm. It would be certainly a loss in their earnings per share, which impacts valuation. But again, these are all short-term concerns. If you believe in Apple as a company you want to own for the next 10, 20 years, you probably can just ignore it.
Yeah, I agree with Ron. A lot of bluster right now coming from the White House, especially ahead of the G20 meeting this Friday. And after the news with General Motors closing the plants and the frustrations that President Trump has with them and talking about them bringing jobs back and not selling and manufacturing cars in China. So I think this is piggybacking on top of that, trying to show a little muscle ahead of a meeting with the G20 countries on Friday. And
you're hitting Apple a little bit while it's down, right? The stock has come under a decent amount of pressure, as most of the FANG stocks have, but Apple in particular is down 22, 23% from late August or early September. Now this kind of talk, has people kind of jumping on the bandwagon and selling Apple off even more. Those are short-term investors, people who are more concerned about the stock going down 5 or 10% in the near term rather than wondering where Apple's going to be 5 years from now. So again, for foolish investors, for long-term investors, I would be more concerned about whether Apple continues to be an innovative company, whether its ecosystem is going to move forward, continue to generate profits, and worry less about what's going to happen over the next 2-3 quarters.
It is interesting just to think about the pricing power Apple has. They've been able to raise the average selling price of the iPhone dramatically over the last 5 years. And now some of the units are up above $1,000. So whether they will decide, if this happens, whether they would keep it and just try to figure out ways to offset that, or if they would actually try to pass that on to consumers, and would consumers be willing to pay a little bit higher? We do know that iPhone sales have kind of just stagnated a little bit, and they've been able to make the revenue growth up on the pricing side, not necessarily the unit side.
And I think I'm part of the problem, because I have an iPhone 6s and I have no desire to get a new phone. What I will do is I'm going to get the battery replaced, because I've already had it replaced once and now it's awful again, but I don't need a new phone. So aren't they kind of at the victim now? I mean, each new iPhone, I know it's better and it takes better photos and all that, but the difference is so incremental at this point. Aren't there a lot of people like me who are like, you know what, I'm good with my old phone and I'm just going to change the battery?
I think there are a lot of people like you that have maybe the 8 or the 8S.
So 6S, I'm behind the time.
You're a little bit. At some point, they're going to stop supporting that at some point.
I have a 7, and I thought I was a little bit behind. But then, of course, I should always just compare myself to Mac, and I think I look better in pretty much.
True story. I was the last guy at the Motley Fool with a BlackBerry, and one of our techies are like, can we quit supporting you? Can you just put that away?
Do you have your Palm Pilot, too?
I do not. Yeah, exactly.